Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. We have the immense pleasure to welcome tonight Luc Steels. So, how to present you, Luc? I don't know where to start. He's what we can call a star in the world of research and science. He has worked at MIT, he has founded the computer science lab of Sony in Paris, founded another AI lab in Brussels. So Luc is a prominent member of the research community working on topics related to the evolution of language. So this is a topic that is extremely important for us. We are dealing with dialogue system. We are trying to understand what is language, and Luc has been working a good part of his life on this difficult topic, and is going to talk tonight about the evolution of language, or how robots or agents could develop their own language, and understanding in the process what is language and what is meaning. Luc, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm really delighted to be here at Aldebaran. Of course, I heard a lot about this company, and it's really impressive, the work that you've done and are doing, and I wish you all the success. So I'm going to talk a little bit about things that I've been doing with many colleagues and friends and students over the past 20 years, let's say. I've been doing things in AI before, but it's sort of, I would say around late 80s, early 90s that I really started to get involved in robotics and language again. And before I was more working, let's say, in knowledge-based systems, knowledge engineering. So I kind of, know what is called classical AI, just as much as I know the more recent kind of stuff. And maybe I'll try first to give you some of the motivation that we have for the work. Okay. You see, the general title is, Can Robots Invent Their Own Language? But the motivation is really threefold. The first one is that I'm interested to understand how there can be communication in language, or something similar to language, grounded in the sensory motor experiences that of a robot, or of a human, or of another entity. So this means that the research that we've been doing is trying to go beyond pure symbol processing, which was happening a lot before, but trying to see how it could be grounded in, in the body and in the interaction with the world. Now, the second thing that we've been interested in is how there could be a kind of lifelong learning. So, this is different from this philosophy of, okay, we take a static corpus, we apply some machine learning algorithm, then we get a grammar or a lexicon or whatever, and our job is done. Okay, so there is the vision that language is something that is continuously evolving, that is adapting, that every time we speak, in fact, I would say we adapt how we speak, or we may invent new words, we may stretch constructions a little bit, so language is not something fixed. And this is a bit shocking to many people, because they think we learned language when we were, 5 years old, and then it's finished, right? But in fact, no, if you look at real language, how it is used, you see change, you see change in adaptation, even in the course of a single dialogue. So this kind of lifelong learning. And then the third question, which I think is related to all this, is about the question of origin. Okay, if you look in other sciences, particularly, of course, in biology, then you see that they have advanced by asking the question about the origin. not only in biology, but also in cosmology, for example, in physics. You know, they ask this question, where does the world come from? Now, they have a lot more money than we have to pose and to investigate this question. But I believe that for behavior, for language, for intelligence, you know, then we can ask the same question. And then we get a much more profound understanding, actually, of why language is the way that it is. And also then we can solve this problem, or we have to solve this problem of lifelong learning, and because it's not just the learner, it's also the tutor that is important, and it's the interaction between the learner and the tutor that gives rise to language. So this is sort of the motivation that we have. And I want to explain to you how we got there, and then what kind of experiments that we have been doing to kind of explore this motivation. And I'm going to go quite a way back. This is a picture, I don't know, from, let's say, late 80s or so. And at that time, I worked quite a bit with Rodney Brooks. Maybe you heard of him. He also came actually from working on traditional AI, you know, symbolic kind of intelligence. He was focusing on vision, but on trying to derive complex symbolic representations of the world when he was at Stanford. And I think with Brooks, and there were other people also, you know, the idea was, well, maybe we have to kind of do a radical rethink of AI and go from this thinking about symbols to go back to the body. Now, the body, of course, we didn't have the means that are available now, but we started building these kinds of Lego-based robots. This was long before Mindstorms, with our own boards and sensors and actuators. Now, a lot of people are doing this now. But I think one of the things that we learned from all this is that you need to take a whole systems point of view, right? You try to build things that are as complex as necessary for the tasks that you have. And you try to build all the components that are needed for that task. As opposed to, you know, I work on vision and I try to build the ultimate vision system that is going to give you a description of the world. Okay, great project. But, you know, well, this was taking time and resources and complexity. And so there was a sort of switch in the way of thinking in the 80s, late 80s, in the behavior-based robotics paradigm, to try and build these small robots that would, at least they would move in real time with as simple sensors as possible, motors as possible, and so on. And one of the things that we already did at that time was already this question of origin, actually. And so we built this environment. This was together with David McFarland. Okay, this is a clip from 1994. I apologize for the quality, because at that time, you know, we didn't have this kind of cameras that there are today, right, on your Sony phone, I would say. So we built this environment. This is with David McFarland, who is an ethologist, and you see there are different. There's several robots in this environment, right? And there's also this box here, which has a light in it, and the idea was to create an ecosystem and to explore how those robots would discover how they could survive in this ecosystem. Now, these boxes, they take light away from the charging station, which has a battery. And so when the robot pushes against the box, then there's more energy available. And so when the robot feels that there's not enough energy, it would go into the charging station to recharge itself. So this was an ecosystem designed with David McFarland. And as a kind of model for a biological ecosystem, in which typically animals have to work in order to get food. They have to cooperate. There's competition for the energy. You know, all these elements that you find in a natural ecological system were put in this experiment so that we could think about the questions like, could there be the emergence of cooperation rather than we putting it in? Okay, how could these robots discover themselves that they would have to cooperate? And or that they were in competition. Now, of course, these robots are extremely simple, but all these things like, this is with sort of simple behaviors, and we had this idea of emergent behaviors also, like wall following, coming from attraction to the wall, repulsion from the wall, and trying to find actually other ways to get the emergence of behavior rather than programming them with a script and sort of top-down by human design. But so this was going on, and this is late 80s, right? I mean, early 90s. And this is sort of the time that artificial life was coming up. And so all sorts of principles of artificial life were explored and developed in the context of experiments like this. But I sort of thought at the time that, okay, this was all very interesting and a lot of fun. But what about the symbolic intelligence that we used to work on before? What about language? What about concepts? How could we make a connection between all this kind of stuff and going back to what is the ultimate goal of AI is to have human-like intelligence also in the symbolic domain. And so this is when these projects started to do related to the origins and evolution of language. And we started actually doing it on these robots. And so the very first experiments by Paul Vogt, for example, were really, how could within this kind of setting, how could there be the emergence of some communication so that one robot would say to the other, my batteries are almost empty, I need to go to the charging station. Or one robot could tell the other robot, rather than just pushing it out of the charging station like you see here, could say, well, there's still so much in the charging station and you have to do some more work so that I get more energy so that we can both survive, this kind of thing, this kind of communication. And so Paul Vogt was very brave because he was trying to do it with these kinds of robots, which were very unstable and exploded regularly because the batteries were too loaded too much and so on, and they fell apart. You see all these elastic bands to keep it all together. And of course, we didn't have much money to do all this work, right? So he was very brave, but then we actually went to more solid experimental setups. And the first one was inspired actually by the way that children play with these forms in order to learn about color and about shape, etc. And so these, we could use them, we could paste them on a whiteboard to create situations. And then we set up this experiment, it's called the Talking Heads experiment, because we had two cameras, this is here in Paris, that were very reliable, and that we could buy many copies and put them all over the place in the world. And so we created an experimental setup where these robots would look at an area of the screen, one robot and the other robot, try to get some sort of joint attention, if you wish, and then play a language game. And so the language game was about drawing attention to one of the objects on the whiteboard. For example, the green square, okay? And the idea was that this was another experimental setup where we could start where these robots did not have any language yet, okay, and to understand how could they create, well, to start with a vocabulary of words like for red and green and triangle and whatever. But also, we wanted to go even further back and understand how they could come up with new concepts, like left and right, or top and bottom, or green and blue. So we wanted to really understand the origins of new concepts in interaction with language. And I think for humans also, there's a very tight interaction between concept formation and language, in the sense that, you know, you learn a new concept, you want to talk about it, and then maybe you invent a word or you reuse a word that already exists for a new purpose. So you extend your language a little bit, and then I tell you this word, and you have to try and figure out what concept could be intended by this word. So you go through conceptualization, and you try to reconstruct the category that I might have used for this word, you see? So it's a way actually that the robots would stimulate each other to create new concepts, and that they would create words in this case, because this was about vocabulary, in order to convey these concepts. And this experiment was actually incredibly productive, I would say, because in the context of it, we discovered the basic mechanisms for the coupling between concept formation and vocabulary growth. And one of the ideas is the lateral inhibition, which means that, you know, you have scores with all the associations in your memory, and then if you're successful, then you increase this association, and if the competing words or competing meanings for the same word, they are kind of pushed down, okay? And so you get a lateral inhibition, like in many neural networks. And so we were able to show that not only could the individual robot learn that way in a very effective way, a new vocabulary and new concepts, but also that if all the agents apply it in a group, then you get actually the emergence of a new vocabulary from scratch. So each of the agents is inventing, but because they have this kind of coupling, you know, they all use this lateral inhibition, then after a while, a word that is beginning to be successful, that means the scores start to increase in each of the agents that are using it, so they will use it more, so more agents will hear it, you know, they will start to use it more, and you get a kind of self-organization of a shared system. A similar way that, let's say, a cloud of birds in the sky, you know, they converge on one cloud, right? Or the ants in a path formation, they all form a path, because they also have this kind of positive feedback loop between, in this case, between pheromone that's being deposited and then attraction to it. And the more they come back with food, the more the others get attracted, and the path will reinforce itself. So this kind of concepts that actually came from artificial life, you know, from attempts to model ant societies and so on, they were transported to the domain of language evolution. And so this was the first very big experiment. I mean, we did it first in the lab, and then we built also this teleportation infrastructure, which allowed a population of agents to live on a server, so to speak. And then to play a game, two agents would download in, you know, the body, but this is just a camera, right? It's not a lot of a body. But anyway, they would download, they would play a game, and then the state would be uploaded. And so the agents could travel, you know, to anywhere to play games, right? And so we set it up in Paris, but also in London and Tokyo, and there was one installation in San Jose in California, and, you know, all over the place. We created this kind of setup and experimented with agents traveling, you know, over the internet, basically, looking to find a body in which they could instantiate themselves, play a game, and then this way we could experiment with lots of agents and see how there would be the emergence of a language. The thing was also installed in the Palais de la Découverte here in Paris, for example. So it was also in a couple of museums. Anyway, so we continued in the same line, and I searched a little bit for these images, which may be familiar to Jean-Christophe, because you know, he helped us a lot by building a vision system. so that we could do much more complicated recognition of scenes. We started to investigate not just how there would be simple words like red and green and blue, etc., but also, for example, talking about the actions and talking about the roles of participants in actions, which is one of the motors for the creation of grammar. Because, okay, it's very good to do lexicons, but of course we were very much interested in the grammar also. So we've been doing this kind of experiments. And then also, of course, the, you know, in Sony there was this robot that some of you may know. It's called the Aibo robot. And it already existed actually in '95 when we were doing these kinds of experiments in the lab. And then I think it was commercialized around 2000 or something like that. And so we got hold of the Aibo, and with the Aibo we could do a lot more sophisticated experiments. I mean, because we could have a robot moving in the real world, interacting, you know, in reality. And then there was a new generation of students that got involved in it. One of them is Frédéric Kaplan. And he got very fond of this robot. I'll show you one example of the work that he had been doing with it. But the example is, I think, illustrates very well the philosophy behind the work that we do. Because the philosophy is, it's situated, right? It's embodied interaction, it is situated, there's turn-taking going on, there's the sort of learning by the robots, but there's also tutoring going on. And I think this is a very important point, is that particularly in the learning of language, that the role of the tutor is extremely important. It's not a matter of just giving data, because the tutor, which can be the mother or the father or the grandfather of whatever, well, not whatever, but you know, caregivers, they give meaning actually to the activities and the words and the phrases of the child. And this is the way that the child bootstraps into language. Well, one example is a pointing behavior, for example. So if you think, how does a pointing gesture arise? Well, then you see, if you trace it down, that the child will actually start from a grasping gesture, trying to grasp an object. And then, because the caregiver sees that the child wants an object, you know, and then brings the object close to the child, you know, so this gesture is a way to get an object. And then it becomes more stylized, more routinized, and this is how the pointing gesture comes about. So you see, but the role of the tutor is crucial, right? Without the tutor, that would not be interpreted already or interpretable, and therefore learnable as a gesture for getting something by reaching out like that. So this is an example for gesture, but for words it's the same thing. So the point is that language is a kind of co-construction between the speaker and the hearer, or between the learner and the tutor. So I'll show a little example of Frédéric. I think this is a nice one. There's a bit of sound with this.
Down.
Sit down.
Sit down. Good. What is it? What is it? What is it? No.
So you have to understand, this is on the eyeball, right? With all the behaviors and all the rest of it, and trying to do it on the processing power that was available on this robot. But you see the idea, right? The interaction with the world, and on top of that, there's a layer in which there are scripts, of course, and the turn-taking scripts, like I'm saying something, I'm waiting, and then you say something. And there is then learning scripts that will allow the acquisition of a word, but within a certain context, right? Okay, so this is a bit about that. Well, of course we can go into all the details of how all this was implemented, but it included the event recognition, of course also the recognition of the objects. So all of this was for real, right? It's not just hand waving. Okay, now I'm going to now go to some other experiments which are more recent. And these are the, let me see where I put it. Okay. So more recent experiments we have been doing with humanoid robots. And the first ones that we have been using are the Curio robots. This is another Sony robot that was actually in the same line as the Aibo. And basically, this is actually the same kind of experiment as the talking heads experiment, but now to do it with a real robot. And so, again, the idea of teleportation, that you could have an agent which is downloaded in the body, and they play a game, but now they can use pointing gestures. So this is a peek at the vision system also, so they're able to get an idea of their environment. So one robot, this one, is saying a word, like in this case, Bolima, and then the other one is making a guess actually what object that would be. So he points to an object, and he said, no, this is not Bolima, and then he can correct it by pointing to the right object, okay? So you see the language game is not a game of successful interaction, right? It's when there is unsuccessful interaction that there is the real opportunity for learning. And so we redid actually talking heads experiments like the one I talked about before. And this gives you an idea of the well, wait, I'm going to show another clip. This gives you an idea, actually, of the semiotic dynamics that arises in these experiments. So this is inside a single agent, so a single robot. And this is the network that they are building of the words. So these are the blue nodes, and these are the prototypes that they have for objects in their world, or for colors or shapes or things like that. These are examples that they are keeping. These are nodes for the concepts related to that. And what I think this image is showing, this is from a real set of experiments, is already 800 interactions that this single agent, right? But the agent is interacting with other agents in the population. But I want to emphasize, you see new words popping up, you see a reorganization of the network, you see that the links between these are getting thicker when the strength of the connection between the word and a particular prototype is being made stronger. You also see, if you looked at the prototypes themselves are still being adjusted. So all of this is dynamic, right? And that's the image that I want to convey to you, is that language is a complex adaptive system. So every agent has these dynamical networks with changing relations, changing strengths between relations. And then you have a population where new words are popping up, and there's convergence, but there's a new word coming in. There's maybe a new agent entering into this population, but a new word, which is causing a kind of reorganization of everything, and so on. So this is more experiments like this, and I would like to show now an example of the work that we've been doing with the more recently, actually, with the so-called muon robot.
100 years after the
I'm going to go a little bit further.
To be excited me to a lab, something remarkable.
Okay. So this is the muon robot. Is a humanoid built by Manfred Hild in Humboldt University.
These robots have been set up to
Is the sound okay?
much like a young child does.
Oh god, okay, right, you tell me what came out to all this. Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Alright. Told me about. I think that was lifting my right arm. Let's see, did I get it right? Yes. I'm learning robots. What would you say to people that would suggest that, well, this looks pretty simple, I mean...
Okay. Well, what would you say to people? Okay, I think I need to conclude more or less. So I think you get the idea, right? We try to sort of program these interactions, situated, embodied interactions, and the learning takes place as part of it. And so learning not only the words or the grammatical phrases, I didn't talk much about that, but we do it also. But also at the same time learning about the concepts that are expressed by the language. Because not only because we believe that language helps a lot for learning concepts and vice versa, of course. You cannot express something if you don't already know the concepts or you build the concepts. But also because there's actually quite significant differences between languages in how they conceptualize the world. And so, in order to get a kind of solid, robust communication, solid communication also for different communities, for different cultures, for different circumstances, I think it's unavoidable that we have this adaptive process, this process in which new meanings and new words arise out of the embodied interactions that are useful for both the speaker and the hearer. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say.